We did. Well,
Hey, we did it.
I found the
It
button.
works.
It's amazing. At
Huh.
some point in time, we're gonna get our ATEMs working, right? So we can stream right to something somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. That is, of course, I had that thing, that whatever that thing is that lets us do that. I had that
Right.
delivered. I don't know what, 6 months ago, and
Whew.
paying for StreamYard was like, oh, let's just like a 1 month stopgap, and yeah.
If it's any consolation, I was paying for it twice at one point in time, once through work and once personally. So it is not a bad service.
Yeah,
You could do worse in terms of streaming.
yeah.
I got a question though. Like when you're using your ATEM Mini, what do you have plugged into it? Oh, we lost him. He should be back in a moment, folks. I believe he probably just refreshed his browser. So I was going to ask him what he plugs into his ATEM because there's some news recently about some camera review site specifically, that might be shutting down, which is kind of interesting to me. And maybe when Matt returns, we can talk to him. But we'll
Hey,
see.
sorry, I
There he is.
I I swiped accidentally and like went
Went back.
backwards on my browser, and so I don't know
It's
what.
all good. It's all good. I was just teeing us up.
I'm
So
new to
like,
this. I'm new to this technology stuff.
no worries. I was just teeing us up. So listen, I assume that you got like a DSLR or something plugged into your A10, and I want to basically just segue into deep review possibly getting shut
I
down by Amazon, which I find super surprising. The question a lot
didn't.
of people have is like, why wouldn't they just sell it?
I didn't realize it was part of Amazon.
Neither did I actually. I like I would assume so. My biggest assumption here is that listen, there's a lot of content like from the past, a lot of like gold. Maybe when I search for camera reviews, generally
Yeah.
I will land on this site. I don't search too much. I watch YouTube a lot for this kind of stuff. However, on YouTube, I'm also watching like Chris Nichols talk about cameras, and Chris Nichols is part of DP Review, and that YouTube component is also going away, which is interesting. Those are, for me at least, those two are interesting because they're Alberta. The boys are they're close to my
Wait,
hometown here in
he's part of
Vancouver, but
DP Review. I
yeah, yeah.
When did
They
that
used to be part
happen?
of the camera. Yeah, they used to be part of the camera show. I think 5 years ago,
Yeah,
or the camera store. Sorry, the camera store show, which is like an Alberta kind of thing.
yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It's
I just
end of an
assumed it was
era.
just. I assumed it was just a few guys that lived in a few folks that lived in London that made a site, and it was always. Oh, did you freeze? No, you
No,
just
I'm here. I'm listening. I'm
okay.
wrapped.
Yeah, I mean, because all the sample photos were always like walking around Canary Square, or Canary Square in London on the Thames, and so I mean that I didn't realize it was more than that, and that Amazon was somehow Amazon.
Amazon. Yeah,
What? That's
looks like they
crazy.
haven't said anything like officially. There's no response from Amazon. Sorry, I'm looking at my other monitor, just making sure that I didn't miss anything. But there's no updates to the articles that I've reading.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've got like the Verge one open. I'll pop that into the show notes. But like, wow.
Wow.
So the question is,
That's
like,
amazing.
do camera review sites not make money anymore? Because I would assume they do, and I would assume like 25 years of content has to make some cash, but maybe it's
Oh
just not
my God.
important to them.
Yeah. That
I don't
is
know.
incredible.
Even just the lead-in sales kind of stuff. So you're talking about cameras. Your next step is
Yeah.
going to be maybe purchase a camera. Where would you
Yeah.
purchase the camera? Possibly from Amazon. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up
Yeah.
here. So odd to me.
Oh my God. That is
Yeah, maybe it's just
incredible.
too expensive to run. I don't know, but I find that
How,
hard to believe.
a web, what? How could
Right?
this be
Exactly.
expensive?
Like,
It's not like they don't have resources.
well, listen, hosting fees, and I get it. They're two different fiscal identities. But yes, I was also thinking the same thing. Like, what could the overhead possibly be? Maybe those UK employees are expensive. I have a feeling that the Canadian YouTubers aren't that much.
Yeah. Oh my God. Wow, that's shocking.
It's very shocking, and I'm specifically kind of, I mean, scared that we're going to lose all that old content because I do go there
Yeah.
a lot of times for like film camera reviews and stuff
Yeah.
from back in the day to figure out like how it was received versus other cameras at the time. that kind of thing, or like the last Nikon film camera.
Right.
How do people feel about that when it came out? Like the
Yeah.
F6 is what I'm talking about, but like that's probably the most recent thing I read there, or like Olympus
Right.
Mu or whatever. Anyway, camera stuff. I just
Yeah, I mean, the for me, it's
amazing to
yeah,
me.
it's always been the buying guides. If you have
Right.
this amount of money and you're
Yeah.
wanting to do this kind of thing, this
Yeah.
is here's all your choices, and it was amazing. I mean, the forums for me, I always thought were garbage, and I
I,
hated them. But
yeah, I'm not a fan either. That
yeah,
expand thread versus like
oh, it's
unexpanded
just
thread
I
where
mean,
you
it's
actually come up
too
twice in Google
painful to use.
results and like it's
Yeah,
very bad. Yeah.
but
Would agree,
but I
but
mean
but the forums actually did have good
yeah,
content. I'll give them
they
that.
did. If
I just
you
didn't like the
search,
UI.
if you yeah, if you use some other tool to search them,
Yep.
because you couldn't. Yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit
Um,
outdated. That's all. But again, I feel like
yeah.
if that's the issue, maybe you could like dump and export it or
Yeah.
re-import it. Sorry, after an
Yeah.
export. 25.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
Wow.
is amazing.
So what else is out there? There's like Ken Rockwell. There's
Does he
DxO, which
still
is mostly
exist?
about yeah, Ken Rockwell's still out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Using
What do
that
I
like
use?
university professor WordPress template, or whatever, those blank HTML2
Yeah.
pages.
I mean, I guess my main, I mean, I guess I do a few, what, EOS HD review or EOSHD.com, I think is one of them. I
Okay,
mean, because originally he focused on Canon and has
right.
since moved on. Um, uh, who else? I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of camera sites that I go to, and I mean that was definitely one of them. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So
then also all the YouTube stuff, I mean, especially the camera store, and I didn't realize he was not. I just saw his face
yeah,
all the time,
yeah,
and
yeah, exactly.
didn't realize it was a different org doing it. Um,
Yeah, so hard.
wow.
So all I'm saying, Matt, is that there's a gap in the market now. I just
Yeah.
floating it out
Okay.
there. Okay.
Well, I'll start working on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Just throw some
this
chat
is
GPT at
a
it. You'll be good to go.
yeah. I mean, it's a hard thing to cover. I mean, with all the different brands, I mean, just dealing with all the menus. Oh my God, all the frustrating menus that exist
Smartphones,
out
video
there.
cameras,
Oh my
digital
God.
cameras, phone
Yeah.
cameras. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like the market is exploding. Like it's not getting any slower.
Yeah.
There are
No.
definitely like mirrorless is the thing right
Yeah.
now, and a lot of these are very fast focusing lenses, linear motors or whatever. Yeah, it's very interesting to me.
Because what do you have
Um,
right now?
oh, that's
What's your
such a
main?
terrible question. The Alpha 7R4, and I say this because like it's
Okay.
way more camera than I need. Like it's 61 megapixels.
Right.
It's way over
Right.
what I need. I can crop 3 times to get in, maybe four actually, to get
Right.
into like Instagram postage
Right.
stamp kind of size file that they actually need. I should be just shooting under the stuff, but I did read like a lot of reviews going into it, and bought the R2 first, and kind of dipped my
Hmm.
toes in that, and then eventually upgraded. But yeah, it took a lot of painstaking reading of articles
Yeah.
and viewing YouTube reviews and figuring out what other people, like my peers or people who I wish more of
Hmm.
my peers are doing. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's so messed. But again, like I hope we don't go down like the DxO review
Right.
path of just caring about sharpness or whatever. Because yeah, they did
Hmm.
review menus, which is a big deal. I mean, the Sony's probably got the worst menu ever, at least in this
Right.
version. I think in the 5 it got a lot better, but it's terrible. It's quite bad.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's where we
Yeah. I
are.
mean,
All things
I've
must
been,
pass.
yeah. I mean, I've been on um, the Lumix route for such a long time. And I love my GH5 that I use right
Of
now.
course. Yeah.
Um, and but but I do see a time where I'm going to be buying a new camera pretty soonish, within the next year, and this would be the site I would go to.
Right.
Yeah.
And it looks like until April is what they said on the YouTube announcement is what they've got. So they're at least on the YouTube channel, they're trying to just find out some
Okay.
content between now and then, just
Yeah.
to basically last hurrah kind of stuff.
Right. Right. Hmm.
Yeah.
Sad.
So there we go. Yeah. So another thing that's going to land in like
Thanks. Thanks for
hopefully the
making this
Internet of
a
Things.
happy show.
Oh yeah, exactly, exactly. Since we're talking about the death of things, I want to talk a little bit about the death of DevOps, if you're okay. And listen, I'm being a little bit tongue in cheek here, but
Hmm.
we talked the last two shows. We talked about a couple reports, but specifically one report, which is like the cloud, a CNCF cloud
Hmm.
report, and in there's a lot of like DevOps stuff, and specifically, I think to me like DevOps means cams. Have always been that kind of person. Not comms. Comms is cool too, but like the
Hmm.
culture, automation, measurement, and sharing kind of approach, and maybe a little bit more pragmatic. It doesn't necessarily be that, but I think that
Hmm.
definition to me is what kind of rang true years, I want to say like 10, 12, 13 years ago when I first started getting into this sort of area of the business. And I feel like at the very least the C is gone and that the S is probably gone too. So it's like DevOps these days seems to be automation and measurement, which is it's fine,
Hmm.
but it's just not the same. And I think I threw it out there nonchalantly as part of the first episode, and I felt a little bit bad, so I figured I'd dive into the details a little bit. But I guess my point
So
is, yep, go ahead.
I, I was, as soon as you said that, yeah, this DevOps dying, what? So I did it. I searched for that in my
Oh,
Google, and
is this
I
not a
don't
hot take?
use.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't use Google. I use Neva, but I did a
Okay.
search in Neva, and a bunch of articles came up about DevOps is dead or DevOps is dying. But then you look at the dates, and they are 2022, okay, good, and 2020, and 2018, and here's one that's same title, 2016, and here's another one, 2015. So
There you go.
yeah, now it's
Not an original
yeah,
thought. Yeah.
yeah.
I
Oh
guess
yeah,
what we were talking
keep
about is
going.
like CI/CD specifically, right? Where I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of
Okay.
people think when they're not used to the
Yeah.
history or don't
Yeah.
know, they associate with CI/CD. And I hate to get on that the hobby horse again or a
Hmm.
soapbox and talk about it, but I do feel like when I talk to other people who aren't necessarily that attuned or aware of
Right.
what DevOps was at the time, because it was a bit of a zeitgeist. Whereas
Yeah.
these days it's kind of considered maybe just commonplace, right? We just assume that people are doing all the things, and GitOps generally comes up in the conversation, or maybe
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
DevSecOps or FinOps or what have you. But all of
Right.
those, I feel like, sit on like a platform that was made for
Right.
them that included things like culture and sharing. And I guess when I get into those other realms, I just don't hear about the culture and sharing too much. There are definitely still culture
Hmm.
talks at DevOps Days. DevOps Days still
Yep.
exist,
Yep.
and I feel like like the place to go to get this kind of meal is the DevOps Days for sure. If you want to drink from
Sure.
the fire hose, that's the place to go to. I feel like the message though, outside of like a DevOps Days is very much more watered down, and definitely not the same
Hmm.
as what I got from it before. The culture maybe will come up once in a while. The sharing definitely not. It's not something like no one's getting excited about Confluence anymore or Wiki Pages or anything like that
Oh.
internally. And I
Oh, do you
really think
mean
it's so
you're
important.
thinking sharing means, confluence within a company or within,
It can mean a lot of stuff. Yeah, it can mean a lot of.
yeah.
It can mean
I mean,
setting like
I would
a
think,
template or what have
I
you.
would think the fact that DevOps Days exists is an example of sharing.
Absolutely, absolutely agree. Yeah, even things like open spaces or birds of a feather or something
Hmm.
like that. Those more collaborative types of events uh,
Right.
at at a conference, like those to me are part of that sharing for sure. I don't.
Right.
Again, I don't want to pigeonhole this just to say like Confluence is the only sharing tool that you can use.
Right.
Some of it might be Slack or it could be Teams or what have you. Like that might
Sure.
be what
Yeah.
you're using for sharing. Maybe it's email. It's possible.
Hmm.
But however you get that the communication, I guess, is still really important
Right.
to me, and how
Right.
you communicate your, I don't know, lofty goals,
Right.
plans, where you are, how under fire you are at the moment, how busy you are. I feel like those are part of the sharing bits,
Right.
and maybe we don't talk about it too much. The culture, I do feel like, at least in DevOps days, we talk about.
Hmm.
Outside of that, maybe not so much. But the automation and measurement
Yeah.
definitely has been around. And I've not heard anyone talk about lean in a minute outside of the DevOps days, but
Hmm. Hmm.
it's possible that people are still talking about lean, which is great because like I do
Right.
agree with lean. I
Right.
just don't necessarily agree that comms is DevOps, but I
Yeah.
understand why it's there.
What was the L in clams? Calms?
The clams works, yeah, or scam is the other. Instead of cams, you can just call it scam. Yeah. It's lean, like lean manufacturing lean. So taking
Okay.
manufacturing
Okay.
principles and thinking about software delivery and figuring out like
Yeah.
what you could apply to software development versus what you may not.
Right.
Some things apply, some things don't.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's, so I remember the comment that somebody had at DevOps Days, Seattle, and I think I
Mhm.
mentioned it here, where somebody said, "Well, you're not covering DevOps in this conference. None of it's about DevOps. You just have all this stuff about culture, and that's not DevOps. DevOps is CI/CD, and it is Jenkins or Argo, or that's what DevOps is. And how come you're not covering those topics? Because that's why we're here." Like, well, that's not what this conference is about.
It's
Um,
like
and
this little bit of the big
yeah,
picture.
yeah. So,
There also used to be a refrain that like DevOps is not tools, right? Like DevOps is not
mhm,
tooling. You can't
yeah,
just go out and buy the DevOps or hire the DevOps engineer.
right,
And I
right,
feel like actually these days there are a bunch of DevOps tools,
yeah,
and
yeah,
people will buy the DevOps and hire
hmm,
a DevOps engineer and create a DevOps
yeah,
team. Back in the day, it was kind of an anti-pattern, but unfortunately, it's become more of a
yeah,
pattern. So, like the platform engineering team essentially is your DevOps team,
hmm,
or SRE or WRE or DBRE,
hmm,
depending on how far down this path you want to go. But it does feel
right,
like those teams of people who might be considered DevOps engineers are now there. So people who can code essentially as
yeah,
well as like run their services was kind of a loose definition back in the day, but yeah,
yeah,
I see a bunch of job recs for DevOps engineers all the time. They come into
mhm.
my mailbox. I think they're finding me on Monster or LinkedIn or something. I have no
Oh
idea
yeah,
how they're getting that email address. But
mhm, yeah,
anyway, DevOps,
yeah,
it's out there. I guess what I'm trying to say is like what you said, 2016, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2022. I don't think it's dead. I just feel like when
yeah,
people talk about it outside of our community, they don't
yep,
necessarily remember all of the bits. And I don't know how to fix this. I think for me at least,
hmm,
whenever I encounter this, I do try to rally pretty strongly behind the C and the S, so the culture and the sharing
right,
at the very least, if not talking about lean. And I think some of the books coming out of is it IT Rev as a publisher are getting more into like the
hmm,
business uses of DevOps, what that would look like. So the
hmm,
Unicorn Project is a good example. Um,
okay. What
I,
was
I
that?
just
The group? What was it publishing?
uh, IT Rev, I believe, is the name of it. I
Hmm,
think it's Gene Kim's company. I shouldn't misspeak.
okay,
A lot of Gene Kim stuff is on there, as well as other
right,
people sort of in that circle. Um,
right,
but yeah, IT Revolution, I believe, is what's it. And some people will tell you that the term IT is kind of passe as well, which is a
hmm,
whole other can of worms. But yeah, IT Rev books are probably a good source for DevOps knowledge at this point in time. I don't think
hmm,
uh,
cool,
a lot of people disagree there. Yeah,
awesome.
DevOps.
DevOps is dead.
Yeah, the rumors of DevOps being dead are largely overinflated.
It's like this is the year to the Linux desktop.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. The other book that they recently published was Investments Unlimited. I think it's supposed to be around FinOps. I own it, but have not read it
Okay.
yet, unfortunately. But that is
Huh.
kind of like my next book on my reading list. Do you still read about like business stuff or?
What's on my right now? I what have I been reading? No, I mean, I do have. I mean, the one relevant book that is in on my Kindle that I go back and forth to is a I think it's called Acing the Kubernetes Administrator or something. Just it's a guy named Chad Crowell wrote it, who I met
Okay,
at the CIVO conference, and actually who we had on my other my other stream
your more
with Brett
successful
Fisher.
podcast.
Yes, yes, the one that where well, somebody actually plans what we're going to be talking about. It's
That's
great.
key. So it looks like this is a like a MEP. So it's a work in progress from 2022.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yeah.
I actually do really like the way Manning and O'Reilly, I guess, do that
Hmm,
kind of.
hmm.
You get little taste of the book as it gets developed.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's often you're getting the. I mean, I've noticed this with a lot of the meeps. You're getting it before the editors have touched any of it. It seems
Good
like that
point.
is the last in the series of steps that happens with a lot of
Right.
these publishing houses. I used to do early reviews of a lot of the
Right.
O'Reilly books, and they were horrible. I mean, every one of them was like, "This is." I mean, these people aren't speaking. I mean, they're writing in English, but they're not speaking English because there's all sorts of problems. Um,
Yes, and
and
it depends on the author. Some authors are better than others,
yes,
I will say.
some are all better, but I apparently don't ever get those books. Um, no, but I mean, chances is pretty good, but yeah, the, a lot of them are often have the problem of like you really have to be able to read and like jump over those issues,
Right. I
which
noticed a
is
lot, at
maybe
least on the O'Reilly side, that the ones that I would read didn't have like any diagrams, which is it's fine.
mm,
However, I'm a
sure,
very visual person, and if it's just
yeah,
like 400 pages of text, I'm gonna
yeah,
get bored, and I'll have to come back many
right.
times. I definitely need like
But
an image once in a while to spice it up.
yeah, but I wonder, if the grammar issues is actually a positive thing. There's on
Mm,
the Kindle there is a one of the fonts that is open dyslexic, and it's
interesting.
like purposely designed to be almost harder to read, so you're forced to
Oh,
spend more
like take your
time
time.
to understanding. Yeah,
I didn't know that. That's
which
really
is
cool.
yeah.
I've seen those
Um,
hacks where they'll like bold the first two or three characters
oh yeah,
of a
yeah.
sentence. Oh, hey Wesley,
Hey,
it's been a minute. Wow, look at that.
wow,
Howdy.
we share that same
Yeah,
remark.
so that little hack
Yeah,
of being able to, I think it's for people who are neurodiverse. I don't know if that really
yeah,
applies or not, but it's just like a hack to read a little bit faster.
yeah, yeah.
So you bold like a two or three characters of a
Hmm.
sentence or of a paragraph, and I've noticed I can just fly through that stuff. And it's the opposite of what you're
Mm.
saying. So I'm not reading at all. I'm just filling
Right,
in the
right,
blanks for the first two characters. I assume that
right.
they're in this. Might be harder in a technical book, but at the very least for fiction, it seems super, super easy
Yeah,
to go through it. This is
yeah.
one of those like popular TikTok videos that I would pretend to have seen it on TikTok, but it'll filter down to like Reddit or Instagram or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not cool enough to have a TikTok account.
Mm.
But I do find that interesting that they provide that font
Yeah,
for you right in the Kindle app because I
yeah,
feel like
yeah.
for me at least that's the best reading experience I've got. Apple Books is okay,
Right,
but the Kindle reading experience
right.
is definitely king.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I guess, I go back and forth between that and, it's probably another one of the Reacher novels, which is always fun to read. So,
Like Jack Reacher, kind of like
Jack
pulpy
Reacher.
kind
Oh,
of.
there's Jack Reacher, and then there's a variant on it who is basically the same character, but who's a woman. And I can't remember what her that story series of stories is called, but yeah, there's a bunch of them. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I get
Well, I
stuck on
have
sci-fi a lot of the times. Like
yeah.
sci-fi
Oh yeah,
audiobooks, I will
yeah.
just read forever. I don't know why. It's something about that like out of the box thinking. There's
Hmm.
stuff that's a little bit different than I might.
Yeah,
It's probably escapism, honestly. But like that
yeah,
stuff that I'll talk about on a daily basis, it's like sci-fi is just
yeah,
way out there. It's great. It's just like a mind
yeah,
vacation or something where I can just think about
yeah,
space travel for a little while. Let's see how
yeah,
that goes.
yeah.
But I get stuck just reading like series of books, like 12 books. Maybe
Hmm.
I'm overstating it here, but like the Dark Tower, I guess, is more fantasy. But those books that are
Right.
just sprawling, and the
Yeah,
writing quality will fluctuate as well. But like
yeah,
Ender's Game, for example, has like a bunch of them,
yeah,
and it's just like I don't know. Ender's Game's a really good book, but the rest of these books aren't that
yeah,
great. There's a
yeah,
couple of them that are good, but they're really
yeah.
they just stretch out. Is Reacher kind of like consistent at least? Because I feel like that novelist can at least write.
Yeah, I mean,
Not so much.
kind of. I mean, it's like the all the Tom Clancy ones. I mean, I felt like those
Right.
were pretty consistent. Well, even when they switched to other authors, when what was the other guy's name? Larry Bond got involved with some of them, and then he did his own, and it was weirdly consistent across all of them. So that was
I like that actually. So on
yeah,
the DevOps novelist side, so maybe what we need to do is get like one editor involved or something throughout all of these, so if they've hit like a certain bar, before you get to see the early release, and then they'll be like up to standard or something. Or perhaps like the early release novels just aren't for you if you
But I
can't
mean,
rough it with the bad
having
grammar.
having the editor, I mean, is a valuable um a valuable skill set, or not skill set, a valuable role to have,
I
whatever
think
you're
it's both.
doing.
Yeah, I
Whether
think it's both. As like a writer, you should be able to edit your own work. I would assume.
yeah, I don't know.
No,
I don't know if
do,
that, I mean,
do you
because
have an editor right now?
right now,
If
no, no,
Yeah,
and
if
so
you're gonna go
everything,
write a blog post, how bad
yeah.
is a blog post gonna be?
Yeah, no, it that I mean that's a problem. I remember like with at Datadog, I was the first person to really focus on documentation, and I did all the docs for I don't know 2 years or 3 years before we started hiring a documentation team. Um, and but I mean, I was the editor, I was the writer and the editor, and when they finally hired somebody to really focus on being the editor, then I felt like documentation got better. Then it got kind of worse.
Definitely.
But anyway,
No way. It definitely got better.
mm, there's also ChatGPT now, as you point out. Yeah, I
Yeah,
am
Leslie's
finally
right.
getting
And
into
there's
the
also like
way of
Grammarly, right?
ChatGPT.
Yeah,
Yes.
and if we're talking about grammar, there's other
Yeah.
services we can feed it into too. If like grammar is the
Yep.
issue, sometimes I feel like with
Are you
those
allowed?
early access books.
Are you allowed
Hmm?
to use Grammarly again, or
No, I think there's
that's
something called Antidote that might be recommended, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I,
And I
I
think what was another one? There was a Veil. I think is something that was used internally for a while. Yeah,
gotcha.
but
Yeah, I think
yeah.
like Wesley's point is like using ChatGPT as opposed to like creating like a writing prompt, but actually feeding
Mhm.
it into, and it's like make this paragraph better kind of thing. I've
Yeah,
had I've had like 50-50, and maybe
yeah.
I'm just a little bit more opinionated, but I might go into something with something. I think folksy is the word for my style of
Hmm.
writing. It's a little bit more commonplace. I won't necessarily use
Yeah,
big words. It's like I'll try to make it really easy and more
yeah,
conversational. It will make it dry and terse, which is great. But if the goal is to make it folksy, you can say like in a folksy manner, please like
yeah.
ameliorate this paragraph, and it really
Right.
it feels like it's kind of missing the mark. But if you want dry and terse documentation, I feel like
Mm.
ChatGPT is there
Hmm.
for you. Like it's kind of like the I don't know, like the this is the average kind of writing, which is a real issue that I've got with these
Yeah,
tools in terms of
yeah,
like generating or editing your stuff. But it's definitely good for a first pass, like for
yeah.
editing, not a problem whatsoever.
And the tool I use for a lot of this stuff is actually called Language Tool.
Okay, how does that work?
So, and that's magic. I don't know. But there's a Chrome plugin
It's like
and other, yeah. It's
gotcha.
it's
It's
one of
like a
these
Mechanical
services
Turk
you
thing.
yeah, I mean there's a free version and then you pay a little bit extra for a licensed version. So I think I'm
Mechanical
actually
Turk.
paying for it. So
Have you used
yeah,
Mechanical Turk before?
it's been a long time. I
Yeah,
didn't know that was still a thing. Is that still a thing?
it's definitely still a thing, and I feel like that's maybe the corollary to a lot of these AI tools is actually like a
Hmm.
human in the loop sort of review process, which I
Right,
feel is
right.
maybe a little bit more interesting to me. It, not that the AI isn't cool, but like once you put a curator in place or an editor in place or something like that, where someone else is making the final call, I
Right.
think is where it's really interesting. Or I guess maybe where it's a little bit mature. I'm saying this as someone who doesn't have access to ChatGPT, or sorry, GPT-4,
Oh,
but
okay.
currently
Yeah.
uses ChatGPT, which is based on
Yeah.
GPT-3. So it could be that there's a world
Right.
of difference between the two. But at present, I
Right.
feel like you still need a human in the loop, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It just adds something. So yeah, I
Mhm.
do often wonder, like those
Yeah.
old machines where you like put a quarter in and like it does something cool based on what you say, and it's just somebody in the background under a hood, like actually doing the work for you. I feel like some of these AI tools are great, but some of the ones that are really awesome have been
Yeah.
honed and tuned carefully by a human. And
Yeah.
once we get those two involved, it's going to be really next level. We can start coming up with like original ideas,
Right.
and
Right.
then making sure that like the average person can follow along kind of stuff. I think
Yeah.
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I mean, so far I've I mean, like with ChatGPT, it sometimes does come up with some original things when you want it to tell you how to do something, and it just comes up with a very original way of doing things that just doesn't exist.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, it was telling me about these. Oh well, you need to use it was something Docker related. Oh, you need to use this plugin system, which doesn't exist, and this particular plugin, which doesn't exist. And this is the instruction set that you'll give it to this thing that doesn't exist. Yeah, that was the problem.
I've had to generate Terraform and things like that, and I've probably brought this up
Hmm.
before, but like areas where I know a little bit more, where I can be
Yeah,
that curator of what's going on. I think that
right.
works. Or writing. I'm not a great writer, but at least I know what
Yeah.
I like and I can see where it's going to. What I
Well,
really worry about.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, one of the things I was really excited about the other day that I did was, the on the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO that
Hmm.
I have a SSD plugged into it, so I can record all all eight
Right.
inputs all onto one SSD. But then, rather than unplugging it and plugging it into my computer, you can also mount the ATEM as a external drive because
Oh,
it's
really? I didn't know that.
uh, as long as it's on the network, you've also got the network jack plugged in.
Really
It will
cool.
be just a network device. And but I basically asked ChatGPT, well, okay, create a Hammerspoon script that would detect when the ATEM
Wow.
Mini is attached or is available, is on the network, and automatically mount it to my Mac as a drive and start copying the files that are on the ATEM that I don't already have, copying them, syncing them to my machine so that I can, finish recording, walk away, get a drink, and come back, and
Great.
all the files are just already on my machine. And
That is awesome.
it did it. It's like magic. It's like, I haven't really tried to make sure that it's at all useful, but it came up with something, and it all looked just like what you would write in, using Lua or Hammerspoon, which is a great automation platform for the Mac. It's
That
amazing.
is really cool. Sorry, there's
Yeah.
knock on my door and some barking there. That's awesome.
Ah,
I feel
yeah.
like does it do polling or like time based? How is it actually checking that things are there?
Yes.
Aha.
Sure. I don't know.
Yeah, I do wonder about like because that's one of those old questions, right?
Yeah.
Should I get the device to tell me when it's online? Should I
Oh
check that
yeah.
it's
I mean,
there?
how is Hammerspoon detecting not how did ChatGPT figure that out? Hmm, that's a
Yeah,
good question.
exactly. Yeah, like
Let's see
what's
what
the actual strategy? I guess would be the question.
right. Um,
Because
I hate it
it could
when
be checking every
ChatGPT
like
says
half second.
so. Every now and then it'll say, "Oh, history is temporarily unavailable,"
Oh
so
shoot.
you can't look at your previous chats. Like, happens a lot.
Yeah, I've had that
Yeah.
happen to me as well. But I do feel like those kind of like that strategy is something that so you might give it a first pass and then say like actually
Hmm.
I'd prefer if you did this in a cron job kind of thing. And like
Hmm.
within or I prefer that you maybe don't poll every half a second or maybe
Hmm.
every 10 would be better. That kind of thing. You sometimes have to nudge a little bit just to get to like where the results should
Yeah.
be as opposed to like the first pass, which is fine. It's the same as having like a
Yeah.
maybe this is a terrible example, but like sometimes from university, you'll get like a co-op student or something like that. And you'll ask them to go off and do a task, and you realize like, well, my instructions were a bit unclear. What I really mean is this, and then they come back again. And they're like,
Right.
close, but instead of in Python, could you write
Right.
in Ruby or something like that? You just it's like an iterative
Right.
process sometimes where there's like a lot of unknowns, and you got to make sure that you're very
Right.
specific about what steps to take. I feel like
Yeah.
there's a bit of that going on with ChatGPT, which
Yeah.
is totally fine as someone who's had
Yeah.
like a bunch of co-ops, like it's definitely still very handy to like understand what your
Yeah.
needs are and to like document them and then make sure that the next time they come to you that you've got them all written down so you can give them that stuff.
Right.
Or next time you have a co-op, you understand how to frame the question properly. But I think that's okay. Chat GPT though, it feels like I don't know. There's a lot of repetition involved just to make sure that you get
Yeah.
like the actual. Sometimes even if you say the same thing twice, you might get different answers.
Yeah.
Or I've noticed like what's really handy for me is like give me a title for I don't know a webinar coming up about this that
Hmm.
kind of thing. Or could you give me like 10 more or 9 more kind of thing?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like that 9 more, like we were talking about jokes last week, for example, like being able to give you more of the
Yeah.
example, I feel
Yeah.
like is way more interesting than just giving
Yeah.
me that initial result. Because if I were to do that with a co-op, it could take like their entire
Yeah.
term kind of thing. Yeah, like now write me 10 more apps that do this with hammers
Right.
kind of thing. Would take a while.
Well,
Whereas the
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
And I mean, I asked it to give me some example for Svelte kit, and then I said, "Oh, actually, can you do that with TypeScript, using TypeScript instead of JavaScript?" And so it did that. And then I said, "Well, actually, instead of using a database, use some Markdown files instead." And
Oh,
so like it was neat to see. Well, here's some of the things that'll be the same, but here's some things that you'll be doing differently,
right.
and that's been fun.
Yeah, yeah. So instead of using like some sort of database abstraction layer,
Right.
let's have you write this for me every time so I can see the
Right.
commonality. That's
And the
pretty
other
neat.
one, neat one was uh, here's, give it the format you need. I need to have a file in this format with last name, comma, first name, comma, whatever, comma, something else.
Oh,
Um,
sample data.
and
Ah,
now give me 50 random lines that match that format.
that is awesome. I had not thought about using
Yeah.
ChatGPT for
Yeah.
sample data, which is like a big problem in big data,
Yeah.
actually. You need to generate gobs of data.
Right.
And to get there, you generally write something that will write your gobs
Right.
of data in order to test, like, I don't know, Kafka or whatever, as you're going through.
Yeah.
And if it's similar, depending on the system that you're using, if it's similar data, if it might trick something up like compression, for example. So things might look very fast because it compressed very
Hmm.
well because they're feeding it the same data over and over. So I'm thinking
Yeah.
about like load testing Elasticsearch is one of those things that I've had to slog through in my career, and writing sample data that would actually make it work on the back end on the indexing a little bit harder than it would normally meant
Hmm.
that it had to be unique pretty much 100% the way through, like just making sure that all of these
Yeah.
are unique points over time, but also contain unique data. So it's not going to
Right.
go through and do cool stuff, because like Elasticsearch will do really neat stuff with things that repeat.
Hmm.
But if they don't repeat, then it's like your worst case scenario kind of thing is
Yeah.
one of the more interesting. I hadn't thought of that before. That's a great idea.
Mm. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I think ChatGPT is one of those things that's going to revolutionize it, at least like kind of the work that I do on a daily basis. Make
Yeah, I
some
think
things easier and
so.
make my job a little bit different.
Yeah. I mean, I love giving, whether it's ChatGPT or any of the other ways that you might get access to the same information, whether you're using, the AI features in Notion or in Lex.page or a bunch of
Right.
these other tools where you say, here's this title, give me a first draft of a blog post, and
Hmm.
it generates it. Or here's my content, give me a good title, and it spits it out. And it's a good first draft. And but I hadn't really thought of. I mean, I guess I'd seen the examples where you just feed it the paragraph and say, make this stronger or make this. Uh,
Right.
it's such a great idea, and I've seen it, but I haven't done it.
I didn't
Yeah.
know Notion AI was the thing. I just kind of like let that
Oh
slide
yeah.
while I quickly Googled it just to make sure. But this is amazing. As a Notion user, this is
Yeah.
amazing. I had no idea it was
Okay.
there. This
Yeah.
is actually really cool.
That and
I
then
feel like I feel bad because I haven't paid for Notion, but I really like it. So
mm,
this might be the thing that tips the scale.
yeah. And then there's the AI that's a part of Fig and part of Warp Dev, which are Warp
How does
Dev is
that
a
work?
shell, and
Yep.
Fig is a basically an add-on to a shell. Um, so I think with both of them, you basically say, I want to list out my files sorted by date and only show me files between this day and this day, and it spits out the command to run to get
You're
that.
blowing my mind. Yeah, I've brought this up. This is amazing.
And there's yeah, I'm like, oh. Or I mean that's listing files, but maybe
Yeah, listing
I've got
files is hard,
this
right?
directory filled with CSV files.
Right.
Come up with a way of pulling out all the CSV, all the lines that match a particular query across all the different CSVs in this directory, plus the tab delimited files in that directory, and it'll come
Wow.
up with a command that pipes all the commands together that comes up with the answer,
You're
which
like
is magic.
obviously you're talking to the like awk programmer over here. I'm joking. I'm terrible at awk, but like that's my first approach. Be like, let's
Yeah.
write something in like a not ancient but very much older programming language, which would like parse two things and then shove a lazy or between them if it fails, kind of thing. So if
Right.
it's not CSV, then try
Well,
this other method, kind of thing. That's
well,
awesome.
well. Here's another one that I use
That would take me
ChatGPT
hours.
for. Yeah.
Yeah.
So an example I used ChatGPT for just last week. So
Hmm.
if you SSH into a host and it's called,
Hmm.
maybe it's some internal, not internal, but a home lab server. You've got
Right.
a Raspberry Pi that's running something, and you've called it, I don't know, you've called the server name Zeus.
Okay.
But then you go and like wipe that machine because you want to start over, and you called it Zeus again. Well, the fingerprint for that host is
Right.
different. That
Right.
Zeus, or maybe it's just the IP address, and now
Right.
you've got a new machine on that same IP address,
Right.
and it says, fingerprint's wrong. Delete it in the known host file, and then try to SSH in again. And it
Right.
tells you, okay, what it's on line 182. Okay, so you scroll through that file, find 182, delete it, but then you also need to delete all the other mentions of Zeus or that IP address in that file. So you have to search around for other. Usually they're near each other,
Yep.
but I just said um, create a shell. Actually, I create a fish shell function. So
Hmm.
a function in fish shell that will look at what host I tried to connect to using SSH in my last command, and then remove all mentions of that in my um, known host or whatever
Right.
connections in that file, so that I don't. All I have to do is SSH. I see that bad fingerprint error, and I run something like I called it delete known hosts. I think I called it DKH was my command.
Of
So I
course.
just run DKH, and it figures out what was the host I tried to connect to in the previous command, and then removes it from the known host file, and it just works. It's like
You're talking
magic.
to somebody with a .ssh file that's like got strict host key checking
Yeah,
turned off, which I shouldn't admit to the public. But like this is generally which is terrible. It's like completely
yeah,
insecure. This method is way better because like yeah,
yeah.
this is
And
more of a
I mean, I could have done it myself.
right,
It would have taken
right,
me.
absolutely
Well, I would like to say that it would take me 20 minutes, but I'd end up being searching for, that last 10%
you
for
want
like
to
the
optimize it.
next four
Yeah, it's gonna take
hours.
you an hour. Yeah,
And 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 ChatGPT did it. Okay, so it did it the first version in, seconds. I tried it and it gave me an error. So I said, I'm getting this error. And so ChatGPT updated the command to be a little bit different, and I tried that, and then I told it what the error was that time, and it came up with another command, and I tried that, and it worked. Magic.
it's definitely that co-op thing though. You had to tell it three
Yeah.
times
Oh yeah. You
what you
have
wanted
to.
to do.
I mean, and it tells you, okay, well, based on the error that you've gotten, here's another
Mhm.
thing you should try, and it's
Very cool.
magic. It's just magic.
I'm loving this.
So
I,
yeah,
I again like for these are the kind of things that maybe I was like proud of before that I could write a shell
yeah,
script pretty easily and push it out and
sure,
have something working in depth. But like honestly, that's not what I'm being paid for at
right.
any job I go to. Like I love shell scripting, but like really, it's not something that's required. But being able to
Right.
curate shell scripts that somebody else is writing and like use them
Right.
and like battle harden them or test them
And
or what have you, whatever
and
the
wouldn't
thing
it be
is
great to
awesome.
have a shell script that works the same whether you're using Bash or Fish Shell,
Oh
and
man,
on
don't get
a
me started.
Windows machine
Or
or a
Z
Mac
shirt or whatever. Yeah,
or a Linux
definitely.
box, you have
Yep.
one script that does it all. I mean, yeah, I could. I mean, I'll get the fish part right on my Mac, but is it going to work somewhere else? I don't know. That's your problem. Or maybe I can come up with the right answer. So I don't know.
That's really
That's
cool.
magic. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't tried it can do some sort of like translating between languages. So for example, like
Hmm.
one of those things is like could I write a script where like the bash will fail and then a PowerShell will work kind of thing. But it won't work
Hmm.
the other way around. So you can have it run on Windows
Right.
regardless, but it won't necessarily run on Linux properly. Being able to translate between bash and PowerShell would actually be pretty handy
Right.
too. And I have
You can
seen
also get
examples
it
of people going from like Ruby to Python and back, which is amazing to me.
right. You can also have it simulate a virtual machine.
Really?
So it's
Interesting.
generate a Linux machine and let me run commands in that machine. And
Wow.
it does, but it's like magic. And so you're
Wow.
basically what feels like a command prompt, and you're doing things, but it's just the prompts.
Very interesting.
I,
Oh
yeah,
man, I feel like next episode we should probably just talk about ChatGPT. Just come with some examples of stuff you're
maybe
using because
come up
we
with
just
some
came up
great.
with a bunch.
Yeah.
Like you blew my mind with Warp and Fig, for example.
Oh yeah.
Like I'd definitely put those in the show notes, but like I'd
Yeah.
not heard of either of these. And unfortunately, like this week, I don't have any tech recommendations. But I feel like these are
Well,
pretty good ones that I need to play with
I
before next week.
yeah. I got one other topic before we get into
Yeah,
picks,
yeah.
though.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So this is a very different topic.
Okay.
Have you ever? I don't know. I mean, there are different terms for this, but I guess the more popular term would be hitchhiked.
Okay. I mean, back
Like,
in the day, yes, I've
I
definitely
mean,
hitchhiked.
have you
As
really?
a
I've
child, as a
never,
child. Yes, I've
I've
definitely hitchhiked as a
never walked
child.
up. I've never asked a stranger for a ride to somewhere.
I lived on a farm, and I guess normally like
Okay.
it's gonna be somebody that I know generally passing by, but
Yeah.
I've certainly gotten a ride to like the store to buy I don't know what I was
Okay.
buying, probably candy or something as a child, and
Yeah.
then like gotten a ride back from the store back
Yeah.
to the farm. Yes,
So
absolutely.
I experienced this last week.
Okay. So
So
were you the hitchhiker or did somebody?
I was, yes,
Oh,
essentially. I mean,
okay.
it's a little bit different.
All
So
right.
I was coming back from Toronto,
Right.
where I was most of the week. I arrived on Thursday evening. Um, Now I live on a place called Bainbridge Island near Seattle,
Hmm.
and one of the, I mean, there's a lot of great things about Bainbridge, but then there's some problems.
Okay.
And one of the problems is that there are two taxi companies on Bainbridge
Okay.
Island, one of which has no drivers after 8 p.m. And the other one has one driver after 8 p.m.
Okay.
or in the evening. Um, and uh, and I I called a few days ahead. I said, "Well, we don't take reservations. You'll just have to
Oh,
call and hope that somebody's available,"
okay.
meaning
Okay.
the one person is available.
Right.
She actually said, "You'll have to hope that whatever the guy's name is will be available." And so as soon as I landed, I texted the guy. I said, "I'm just landed. I'm hoping to get the 10 o'clock ferry.
Right.
Um, I would be great if you can pick me up." And I got no response for a while. And then it's looking like I'm not going to make it. So I text again, says, okay, not going to make the 10 o'clock, but I'll make the 10:40 or 10:50 ferry. And so I'll be there at like 11:30. And then at that point, I get this super cryptic message that is like, I don't really understand what he's saying. But then I like ask for more information. He says, oh no, I am picking somebody up from SeaTac Airport right now. And so I'm not going to be back at the
Right.
um, on the island for another 2 hours. Like, so I'm okay. So I have no way. So I could call my mother who lives on the island to give me a ride, but she's 85 or 8,
Also feels a bit weird.
and
Yeah.
eyesight is not so great at night, so I don't really want to do that.
Right.
My wife is at home and could come and pick me up, but our 4-year-old daughter, is in bed
Sleeping.
asleep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
does that mean
Don't want to
you
wake her up.
leave your child at home alone? No, 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 no. Or do
Absolutely.
you wake her up? Or do you wake her
Back in
up?
my day,
Which is
absolutely yes.
yeah. Oh yeah,
Now,
yeah, yeah.
no.
Um, so that wasn't a great option. I said so she asked, well, should I just wake her up and come over? And said, there's one other choice. I'm on the ferry now. I'm gonna wander around, look for somebody who doesn't look too scary, and ask them. And I mean,
Also, you're a
this
pretty
is
tall guy, right? Like if you came to my car asking for a hitchhike, I might
yeah,
say Matt's gonna murder me.
yeah. And but there's also there was a football game that got out. Some XFL, I don't know, some other kind of football.
Never heard of it.
I don't know
Okay.
what XFL is, but
Mm.
and that game had just gotten out, and so there were a bunch of people there who were they were probably very nice, but they didn't look. They could look like they could. snap me
Just a different
into,
crowd. Yeah, just a
yeah,
different crowd
different
than you're
crowd,
used to.
different
Yeah.
crowd. So a crowd that I am not used to. Okay,
Right.
so okay, so I rule them out. I start looking around, and I find somebody. I was like, okay, he's my
You
target,
found your
my
mark.
mark, whatever. And so I
Your
like,
free ride.
but I had to sit down, like get myself worked up for
Right.
this moment. For
Build up the
I mean,
confidence.
I do not do well initiating conversation with strangers.
Right.
But
Regardless.
I finally, so finally, I was like, okay, fine. So I go up to him, I sit down next to him, or across, right, looking at him, and says, "I'm so sorry to bother you." Uh, I also just, I mean, he actually had a suitcase with him, so he had just flown in as well, or I assumed. Um,
Right.
I've just flown in from Toronto. All the cabs are there. There are no cabs. Would it be possible to get a ride from you to? It's like, sure, no problem. Yeah, I mean, the cops here are terrible. Yeah, I mean, it was like instant, like out. Absolutely, I can help you.
Right.
And I think that would. I mean, for a lot of the people who live on this island, I think a lot of them would probably say yes. But it's that initial ask. It's like, oh, how do I do this? I'm terrified of this. But yeah, he was no problem. And
Not going through
um,
your mind, there wasn't like, yeah, this is obviously
yeah,
an axe murder, just waiting for people to hitchhike.
yeah.
The suitcase is empty. I'll put Matt in there. It'll be perfect. None,
And turns
none of
out the
this
guy
crossed
works
your
at
mind.
Microsoft, and it was a really interesting conversation. So it was good.
I feel
So
like Bainbridge Island is one of those
I'm still
places
alive.
where hitchhiking is probably safer. It just
Yeah, yeah,
having been there before, like or been in that area
yeah,
on some of the other islands,
yeah.
it seemed pretty well off, and also like there isn't a lot of traffic.
No, no. So
That's
yeah, I
awesome.
made it home alive. Yeah.
Did you feel better or worse after this experience?
I I I mean, so we
Would you
made
do it?
sure that we have a plan for next time.
Right.
So my mother has a car. She doesn't really drive it. Definitely doesn't drive at night. So what we'll do is I'll have a copy of her keys in my on my keychain just in case, and we'll just have the car parked in the ferry parking lot, a few
That's a
hours
good idea.
before,
So
and
like
then
parking goes.
they can go to sleep,
Yeah.
and I can get in the car and drive home. And if some
Yeah. I
stranger
was
walks up to me says, "I need a ride," it's like, yeah, sure, come on.
Well, that's the other thing. Yeah. Would you return the
Yeah.
favor? Because I've
Oh,
certainly picked
absolutely.
up hitchhikers before and gotten some looks, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've been in that spot, so I understand it. But generally, I will also avoid hitchhikers, which feels terrible because like I've been
Yeah.
in that spot where you
Yeah.
need to get somebody to ride because you're
Yeah.
stuck in the rain or what have you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna drive in the puddle and like make sure they get wet or something like that. But I definitely do like pass them by, and it feels a bit
Yeah. So, yeah, that's my hitchhiking experience.
bad.
I'm
Excellent.
now
So the
pro.
recommendation is to have empathy, perhaps,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
swallow your
Yes.
pride and ask when you need help. Yeah,
Yes.
not to
Yeah.
not to be
Actually,
a morality spinner.
so there's a program that I think won, I don't know, was Emmy, Tony, Oscar, I don't know, whatever, some award, for
Okay,
being, a TV program. It's like not a movie, but it's a special. It's called something like the horse, the fox, the something, and the something. It's on
interesting.
Apple TV. It's beautiful. It is
Hmm.
such a beautiful story. It is so wonderful to watch. It's for
The horse,
kids,
the
but
boy, the fox, and the mole.
that's it.
I,
Yes.
I think I said box, but I meant to say fox. Sorry. The boy, the
It
mole,
is
the fox, and the horse.
beautiful. It is so beautiful. It's so calm and peaceful and
Oh,
a
it
little bit
looks really well
sad, but a
animated
little bit
too. Yeah.
happy, and it's wonderful. But I played the trailer recently for somebody else. Like, oh, you should watch this. Here's the trailer.
Mhm.
And in it, one of the characters asks the other, says, "What is the bravest word you know?"
Mm.
Uh, and the person said, "Help."
Ah,
That is the bravest word. Help does not mean that you are giving up, but that you are staying in, and you just need help getting to that next step.
right.
Well,
That's
that's
poignant.
a
I
really
like
nice
it.
thing to pull. Yeah, no, there were
Yeah,
so many
we should
great
end
points like
here.
that
A
in that.
positive message from this
Yeah.
podcast.
Wow.
Whoa.
Start off with DP review going away and end with ultra
Build it
positive.
up to. I do like Le Petit Prince or the Little Prince and stuff like that, where it's like a kid's story, but also there's like a couple other
Mhm.
levels on it where you can like on further
Oh,
thought you can like unlock a little bit more.
yeah. There's a series of books that we got
Hmm.
for Stella
Right?
that is amazing. I think it's like the best set of books for, if
Yep.
you're
I got my
changing a
Google.
career, if you're or just for anyone. I mean, I think it's meant for kids, but I think the
Right.
people get the most out of it are adults.
Okay. So you're
Um,
googling. You forgot.
I'm looking for it. Uh, what, oh man, what is it called? Um,
Is it Babar?
Yes. Okay. Okay. So, oh, I got a video of it instead. Okay. The author is Kobe Yamada.
Okay.
I think he is a Seattle based. Um, but the stories are what do you do with a chance?
Gotcha.
Um, and there's a number of others. Um, Kobe
I like this.
Yamada.
Yeah, there's a bunch in here. And
Yeah,
Kobe is
and they are all
Kobi. I'll put a link in the show notes.
KOBI.
But yeah,
Yeah.
Yamada's
What to
Yamada.
Yeah, what to do with the chance? I think one of the other ones is a wish, and another one is I don't know,
Right.
something else. They are
These look awesome.
amazing, amazing books.
Very cool. I
Um,
like these kind of things.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
the Little Prince, like that kind of
yeah. Oh
ways of
yeah.
thinking about problems a little bit differently. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's really cool. Trust your crazy ideas is another one. Very interesting.
Mm.
I like it. Man, it's
Yeah.
positive spin here. Whew. I think child rearing
Oh yeah,
is
what to do with an idea was another one. What to do with a
yeah, I
chance?
saw that one.
What to do with a problem?
Yeah, the idea seems
Those
to be
three,
like
we
the
got
most
those
popular one.
three, and they're great. And it looks like, oh, and then we got actually, my Father's Day present was Because of You, Dad, which was
Oh,
another really great story that turns out he's also got Because of You, Mom.
I
So
was
I
just about to
feel
say Mother's
less
Day is coming up. Yeah, it was right
excited.
beside it here
Yeah.
on the list.
Oh, and then another one. I didn't I another one that's similar to the What to Do with a Wish or others.
Okay,
I thought it was very similar. I didn't realize it was the same guy. The Candy Dish
okay.
is another one of his books that is also amazing. And so I don't know where he's from. I want to say he's Seattle, but
I feel like you might be right.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely American. Not sure the place, but yeah, these look like awesome
yeah,
books. Kobe
yeah.
Yamada. I say this as like someone who needs to come up with gift ideas all the time, and these seem like pretty good, wholesome gift
I
ideas. So
I
thank
mean
you very much.
I think this would be a great, applying these the topic or the story to what we do. I think would be a great talk.
The C and cams, yeah, I like
Yeah,
this talk. Okay, so
yeah,
I got to read one of these then.
yeah,
And the candy dish is also by Kobe Yamada. Okay,
yeah,
well, these are sweet. Thank you so much. I'm
yeah,
definitely going to use
yeah,
this because Mother's Day
yeah.
is coming up, and I think like
Ah, yeah, yeah.
it's always good to have like something in your back pocket. Because I listen, I try
That's
to
right.
plan things, but I often forget like what day of the week it is, let alone what the date is.
Yeah, oh God, yeah,
It's
yeah.
terrible. I don't have much to recommend other than like a pinhole
Yeah.
adapter for your camera. That I
Oh,
don't
yeah,
know
yeah,
if this
yeah,
is
yeah. You
a
said
thing you can get for iPhones or anything like that, but I've been
right.
playing around with pinhole photography again, and I'm
Yeah.
really liking it. I'm using the term pinhole here a little bit loosely because I think it's actually f84 or f82 for the Sony at
Mm,
least because it's made for APS-C. Whereas on the
hmm.
Nikon, I think it's f I don't know 164 kind of thing. It's
Right,
quite a bit. So I used the Nikon one before, and as we were talking about before, I've moved to Sony
right,
for a few years now. I don't use pinholes
right.
that much, and I thought, hey, is there possibly one out there that I can get instead of making my own out of a lens
Right.
cap, which is what you typically do. I got the wide one. It's called the sorry, I'm knocking things over my desk here. It's called the Rising pinhole adapter. It's from Korea. It's actually impeccably built. So it's essentially a lens
Yeah,
cap with like a really nice CNC machined
yeah,
element shoved in the middle there, and it's a
yeah.
tiny hole, of course. And the exposures are about 4 seconds, which is nice because on the Nikon with
Hmm.
that larger f-stop, it was
Yeah,
like 10 seconds, 20 seconds. It was really bad.
yeah,
But in 4 seconds, you can get a nice flow of movement.
yeah.
I had somebody like just helping me take up light stands, put them up and down kind of thing. And I
Hmm.
took a pinhole of that, and it looks magical. It's almost like watching a dance.
Yeah,
It's really cool. So you get like
yeah,
a lot of the flowy movement, that kind of stuff, as well as like the color that you get from newer cameras. And I've just been
yeah.
tickled pink with the results. I need to
Wow.
come up with a better concept. But yeah, I'm
Yeah,
super loving it. Pinhole cameras, highly recommend.
yeah. I had gotten the early Kickstarter. There was one that was available, pinhole something, um, and and it was, yeah, lens cap with this laser created hole in this little bit of foil at the end. It was really nice, and I still have it somewhere, and I've used it every now and then. But one of my favorite childhood experiences that I often think of, and
Hmm.
we would um, I grew up on another island off the coast of Miami called Key Biscayne, and outside our window, or outside our house, where it's often be blue skies and these certain types of trees, sea grape trees that um, were there, and then the road, and we would set up like a dark curtain on the window, but have a like a dark sheet of paper with a hole picked through it,
Right?
and then on the other side, on the wall on the other side,
Oh,
have
flip it. Yeah.
a board a board with a large sheet of paper on it, and it
Nice.
would project this image, this pinhole image, on basically creating the turning the our dining room into a camera obscura, which was the old
Yeah.
style of, I mean, before cameras, before film. Um, and then I was, they my parents gave me a set of pencils, and I could kind of draw out this image, this upside down image, of our street scene, and
That's really
and
cool.
then it was a fun thing to color. And so I always think about that as being, this super low tech way of doing this kind of thing. Yeah, so that was I think that's a neat thing for anybody to try, even now.
I don't know. So I feel like because of you, Dad, like maybe you need to pass this on,
Yeah, yeah, I know. Oh,
right?
it's
Yeah,
definitely something that we will be doing. Yes,
that's really cool.
so
I like
it's
that. I
fun.
should try that. I didn't have
Yeah,
the luxury as a
it,
child. I didn't understand how pinholes
yeah.
worked.
I mean, it's something anybody can do. It's so easy to do. Get a
Yeah.
get a black sheet of paper, or some sort. I mean, it doesn't even have to be totally dark. I think sometimes we used. It was actually the door was never really well sealed, the front door, and so basically it was putting the paper in front of the crack in the door, and
Gotcha.
that would block out most of the light, and then some light would come through this little pinhole. It was actually made with a pin, um, and then prop up the board on a few feet away, and
That's
a big sheet of
awesome.
paper, and it was great. Yeah, it was great. It was a fuzzy image, but I mean, but it was great.
That's fine. We'll call it an impressionistic drawing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. That's all I had. I
Okay,
guess next week
that's
we'll
a good.
hopefully talking about ChatGPT again. But I will look at so Warp and Fig, absolutely,
Yeah.
because that's something I could use
Well,
on a daily basis.
I'm looking forward to my next stream that I do with my friend Brett Fisher,
On your better podcast, yes.
and on the other podcast, not the better one. Um, it So Brett Fisher's DevOps and Docker Talk.
Hmm.
Last week there was a bit of a kerfuffle around Docker.
Oh
Basically, with
no.
Docker saying, if you have an open source project with images up on Docker Hub, we're deleting them in a month.
What?
It was.
How
It
did
turned out to
how did I
be.
not?
It turned out to be really just a bad announcement, and
Okay.
what we're actually doing is nowhere near as bad as it sounds.
Okay.
Um, but there was a good day, 24 hours of like people just freaking out.
Yeah,
Um,
panic, of course.
and yeah, and so next week, or no, this week, this Thursday, Brett and I are going to have the CTO of Docker on the call, as well as
Awesome.
the head of developer relations on the call, talking about, well, what is the real story now?
What
Now that we've
happened
had a
and
week to
why?
really think about it, what
Yeah.
happened? How did that happen? And so that should be an interesting call. And those are great. There's usually on each one of them, as we're doing it live, I mean, we almost have the same number. They're at about 50, so
Right.
about 50 more than us. And
So close.
uh,
Approaching zero.
yeah, and but then a lot
We're
lots
definitely like a
afterwards, and
long
it's
tail
great.
podcast. Come on.
We are a long tail. We are right. I mean, and yeah, yeah,
The longest of long
yeah,
tails.
yeah. Well,
That's really
I
cool.
think
I'll have to tune in.
we
Please,
can,
please send me a link.
yeah,
Let's tune in
we
and
can
watch
probably
this.
hit the same numbers if we come up with 4 courses on Udemy that have 400,000 students in each of them,
Oh,
and
that's
then we can
easy.
achieve that kind of number. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
no problem.
an intro to DevRel using ChatGPT
Yeah,
part. It writes
yeah,
itself. In fact, ChatGPT could write it for me.
and then we could have another course about how DevRel is dead, or
Oh,
DevOps is dead. Yes, yeah,
so DevRel said, "Don't get me started about that." But I think Wesley might have something to say there.
yes, yes, cool.
All right,
All right,
I think
I'm gonna
that's it for
search for that.
me.
I'm gonna search for that end broadcast button.
You got this. We believe in you, Matt. I've got empathy.